Hi everyone and welcome to the next part of Aron Nimzowitsch, my system. The customary quote: playing chess has many aspects that can be useful in everyday situations like planning, concentration and combinations. You learn to win but also to lose and to be creative. From the Hungarian Grandmaster Judith Polgar, generally considered as the strongest female chess player of all time. Now a review of the last part where we discussed regarding the diffusion or spreading of blockading effect, the blockader's primary and secondary functions, and effect of the blockade with illustrations given by Nimzowitsch. So now, moving further into the book, Nimzowitsch discusses regarding the fight against the blockader, his uprooting, changer les bloqueurs, which is French for change blockers, how to get a standoffish or unfriendly blockader replaced by one who is more affable or friendly. Nimzowitsch writes, when we said that the blockader derived their effective strength from their connection with the country to their rear, this was an indisputable truth. Yet, they can and should contribute something of themselves to the protection of the blockading rampart or defensive wall. This they do in that, thanks to their attacking radius, they ward off the approach of enemy troops from themselves. It is also a merit in them if their origin be humble. The humbler the better. By this we mean that a blockader should have a thick hide. The rather exaggerated sensitiveness displayed by the king or queen would ill consort with the role of blockader. A minor piece, knight or bishop, can stand up to an attack. In case of need, they have only to call up aid, whereas the queen reacts to the slightest attack to such an extent that she at once, though with head proudly erect, leaves the field. In general, the king would also be a poor blockader, but in the endgame, his royal attribute of being able to change the color of his squares stands him in good stead, so that if he be driven away from a black blockading square, he can try at the next halting place to establish a blockade on a white square. For instance, consider the position on board. The check, bishop c2 check, drives the black king from g6, but now he takes up the blockade again at g7. Since the blockaders, as we have seen, may be of varying quality, strong or weak, elastic or inelastic, the obvious thing to do is to get one blockader replaced by another, if this would suit us better. If I take a blockader, the recapturing piece takes over their role, and by so doing, the command changer les bloqueurs becomes a fait accompli, or something which has already occurred, leaving no option but to accept it. The following combination is typical. In the position on board, the opening moves would be rook b8 check and rook f8, and now the attacking range of the bishop renders difficult the approach of the white king, which would else be decisive. There follows, however, rook takes on a8, rook takes on a8 and king b7. This new blockader, the rook at a8, now shows themselves to be an accommodating fellow, and nothing is further from their thoughts than to stay and attempt at approach. So rook f8, a8, queen, rook takes on a8, king takes on a8, and the pawn endgame is untenable or impossible to defend for black, since the black e-pawn's flank will be turned. King g7, king b7, king g6, king c6, king g5, king d7, king f5, king d6, and white wins. On the other hand, rook b8 check, rook f8, and king b6 instead of rook takes on a8. Then comes bishop d5, king c7, king f7, rook takes on f8 check, king takes on f8, and king b8 would fail because of king f7, a8 queen, bishop takes on a8, king takes on a8, king g6, and black wins. In the position shown on board, black would be perfectly safe if their king were not so far away. White makes the more accommodating black rook take the place of the embarrassing bishop. Thus, rook takes on f5, rook takes on f5, king g4, and white's pawns become mobile and the black king arrives too late. Rook f8, g6, king b5, f5, king c6, g7, rook g8, f6, king d6, and king f5, frustrating or stopping king e6 for black, and white wins. The idea is this: the attacking party is prepared to come to an understanding with the blockading company, but wishes first to see its apparently rather unsympathetic spokesman replaced by someone else. This done, negotiations may begin. By negotiations, I mean the uprooting of the blockader. How are these negotiations to be pursued? Well, we concentrate as many attacks as possible on the blockader concerned. The latter or the blockader will naturally call up reserves in their support. In the fight now raging round the blockader, we seek, following the best practice, to bring to bear a superiority of forces, and this by trying to kill off the defenders by exchanges, or to drive them away, or otherwise to divert them. Finally, the blockader will have to retire and our pawn can move forward. In the end game, in the event of a blockade, we usually drive away the blockader's supports. In the middle game, on the other hand, we seek to busy them. A very instructive example of all this is furnished by my game against von GOTTSCHALL, BRESLAU 1925. See game number 13, which the student is advised to study at this point. So let's go through this game. Hermann von GOTTSCHALL was a German chess master who played around the turn of the 20th century. The game was played in 1925 in the Breslau tournament in Breslau, then Germany and modern-day Poland. Notes by Nimzowitsch, and he writes regarding the game: an instructive example of the method of dealing with the supports of a blockader. In the end game, they are usually driven away. in the middle game, on the other hand, kept busy. Nimzowitsch had the white pieces in the game and won GOTTSCHALL with the black. Nimzowitsch began with knight f3 and won responded e6, d4, d5, e3, knight f6, b3 and knight d7, on which Nimzowitsch comments, he should have played c5 and knight c6 instead. But knight d7 and play continued with bishop d3, c6, bishop d6, castling, bishop d6, bishop b2 and queen c7. Nimzowitsch writes, in order to play e5 and thus open up the game. To prevent this, white undertakes a counter attack, c4 and b6, where Nimzowitsch writes, if now e5, the continuation would be c5, bishop e7. If instead e4, c takes on d6, queen takes on d6 and bishop a3. So bishop e7, b takes on e5, knight g4, b4, knight takes on e5, knight takes on e5, knight takes on e5, f4, knight takes on d3, queen takes on d3 and white commands the diagonal b2 to g7. As such, b6 was played by Vaughan. Knight c3 by Nimzowitsch, bishop b7, rook c1, rook c8, c takes on d5, e takes on d5 and e4, on which Nimzowitsch remarks, white opens all the lines. D takes on e4, knight takes on e4, knight takes on e4, bishop takes on e4, castling, d5 and c5. Nimzowitsch writes, the two bishops have now a clear line of fire to the enemy king's wing. Impressed by this, the second player is inclined to underestimate the fact that the d-pawn is now passed. In fact, to overlook it altogether. And indeed, what possible role could this most carefully blockaded passed pawn play? Why, a reserve blockader is already stationed at d7. But things turn out quite otherwise. Rook e1, queen d8 and bishop b1. Nimzowitsch writes, this attack leads to the instructive results that the blockading pieces, the bishop at d6 and the knight at d7, are either cut off or killed off. Rook e8 and queen d3, on which Nimzowitsch comments, first, rook takes on e8 check would have been more precise for white. So queen d3 and knight f8, and Nimzowitsch remarks, rook takes on e1 check would have been more precise for black. But knight f8, rook takes on e8, queen takes on e8, knight g4, f6, knight f5 and rook d8. Nimzowitsch writes, black is about to try to show up the weakness of white's d-pawn when he is wakened from his dream by the flash of a sacrifice. Bishop takes on f6 and bishop takes on h2 check. Nimzowitsch writes, in order not to lose a pawn, black must submit to this indirect exchange of his bishop. If g takes on f6 instead, then comes knight d6, knight takes on d6, rook takes on d6, and queen g3 check, picking up the black rook. As such, bishop takes on h2 check was played by black. King takes on h2 and g takes on f6, on which Nimzowitsch remarks, "What a change! The black bishop at d6 has disappeared, and the reserve blockader, the knight at d7, will soon land at g6. The d pawn is therefore free." Queen g3 check, knight g6 and f4, on which Nimzowitsch comments, "To allow rook e1. The passed pawn is indirectly protected." King h8 and not bishop or rook takes on d5 because of rook e1 and knight g7 check, and so on. So king h8, rook e1 and queen f8. Nimzowitsch writes, if queen g8 instead, the passed pawn would have come into their own in a most interesting manner, namely as follows: knight e7, knight takes on e7, rook takes on e7, 7th rank, queen takes on g3 check, king takes on g3, rook g8 check, king f2 and rook g7. Apparently the 7th rank is now neutralized, but the passed pawn has something to say to that. d6, rook takes on e7, d takes on e7, bishop c6, bishop e4, bishop e8, f5, king g7, bishop d5, and now the pawn at e7 is unassailable. King h6, king f3, king g5, king e4, and black is powerless against the threat bishop b7, king d5 and bishop c6, and the blockader must die. As such, queen f8 was played by von Gottschall. d6 by Nimzowitsch and rook d7, on which Nimzowitsch remarks, why not bishop c8? Would not this have led to the winning of the passed pawn? The answer is no, for the continuation would be knight e7. By d6, white has provided an outpost station at e7. Queen h6 check, best. King g1, knight takes on f4, and now knight takes on c8, rook takes on c8, d7, and white wins. As such, rook d7 was played and queen c3, on which Nimzowitsch writes, threatening rook e8, queen takes on e8, queen takes on f6 check, king g8 and knight h6 mate. Accordingly, the 8th rank must be safeguarded by the retreat rook d8. But in this case, the 7th rank will be left without protection and white wins by rook e7. Note that the winning moves rook e7 or knight e7, as in the last note, must be regarded as a direct consequence of the passed pawn's advance. Rook takes on d6, a desperate expedient or practical but possibly improper action. If rook f7 instead, then d7, rook takes on d7, and rook e8 would have been immediately decisive. So rook takes on d6, knight takes on d6, queen takes on d6, bishop takes on g6, h takes on g6, rook e8 check, king g7, queen g3, and white won. Bishop c6, rook e3, bishop d7, f5, queen takes on g3 check, king takes on g3, bishop takes on f5, rook e7 check, king h6, rook takes on a7, bishop b1, rook a6, b5, a4, b takes on a4, b takes on a4, king g5, rook b6, bishop e4, a5, f5, a6, c4, a7, c3, rook b3, f4 check, king f2, c2, and rook c3, where black resigned the game. Alright, we conclude this part of Aron Nimzowitsch, my system here, and we shall continue onwards from the next one. Shout out to fellow streamer Kowalski X for subscribing to my channel on Twitch last week. Kowalski is a good chess player originally from Ireland but living in Canada now. He has a fun chess stream of his own where you can enjoy chess and his good taste in music. A link to his stream will be available in the video description. Do check him out. Distant187 aka Seth for extending his sub. Distant recently started streaming as well, and he is a solid player and a very nice guy. I will post a link to his stream as well in the video description. Do check him out. RockyMtnChess for continuing his subscription. Karmadumpster, the top chairer with 307 bits. Fellow streamer Skwerly at second with 300 bits. Olipals at third with 100 bits. And then anonymous support with 10 bits last week as well. Thank you for the support everyone, much appreciated. Alright, till next time, take care and stay safe.